Hi guys, this is Mrs. Gassler, and in this video we're going to talk about the names and formulas of covalent compounds. This is by far the easiest of the naming and formulas of compounds because you have to do very little to be able to do it. So let's go ahead and get started. I've got some Cornell paper, and you might find your periodic table handy, especially if you haven't memorized some of those symbols for the elements. Our objective is names and formulas of covalent compounds. Don't forget your name, class period, and date. And our essential question is, how do I write names and formulas of covalent compounds? So this one has a lot less to it than the ionic compounds. There's only one thing that we need to remember when we're naming covalent compounds, and that is the subscripts. We use the subscripts to determine prefixes. So a prefix is going to be super important in our covalent compounds, and so what we have is a list here. So the prefix is a number, or it's a word that indicates the number of atoms of an element involved. Okay, so there will be a prefix on it if there is more than, well, there will be a prefix on it in most situations. We need to find a prefix for all of the elements involved in the compound, and those prefixes look like this. So we've got 1 through 10. It happens that we have more than that, but generally speaking, you won't have to worry about that. For 1, we would write mono. I'm going to put a colon instead. For 2, we would write di. For 3, tri. For 4, tetra. Maybe you've heard of those before. These are pretty similar in math classes. We call it a quadrilateral. That's a little bit of a difference there, but tetra is from the game Tetris. Notice how all of those blocks had 4 pieces. A tetra is 4. 5 is penta, like pentagon. 6 is hexa. 7 is hepta. 8 is octo. 9 is nona, and 10 is deca. So those are the prefixes that you would see for those elements, and you've got to find one for all of them. The only one that's optional is mono. Sometimes you need it, and sometimes you don't. It really just depends on who you're talking to. Okay. Now the other thing that you need to do when you're writing a name for a covalent compound is that you have to change the N to "ide" like we did before. So we're going to do that. We're going to write that down now. So the first thing is we have to determine the prefix. That's our first step. Then our second step is to change the end of the last thing to "ide." So now we're going to practice that with some examples here. I've picked some examples with the same set of stuff in them, and we're just going to write down the covalent compound. Remember, in an ionic compound, we would have to figure out, oh, what's the charge that makes this happen? Don't do that here. No charges are necessary. Nobody cares about the charge in a covalent compound because they're not giving and taking. They're sharing, and they can share in a variety of ways. So we need to write that down here. So we've got N and O. I've got one of this and one of this, which means mono would be my prefix. And generally speaking, we leave mono off of the first one and we put it on the second one. So this would be nitrogen. And then I'm going to put the mono on. The 2 O's come together to make 1 O, and then I've got to change the N to "ide." So nitrogen monoxide. Maybe you've heard carbon monoxide. It's the same idea there. Now I have one of these and 2 of these, so this one would still be mono, but it's optional. And then the 2 is di. So this would be nitrogen dioxide. See how simple that is? And then here we've got 2 of those and 3 of those. 2 is di and 3 is tri. So this would be dinitrogen trioxide. the symbol or the prefix tells you what element would have to be there. Okay. Now, writing the formulas is just as easy. Again, covalent compounds are the easy ones. So to write the formulas of the compounds, we just have to do a couple of things. First, we have to determine the number of each from the prefix. So this time we'll be reading the prefix, and if there is no prefix, that means there's only one of that atom. Okay. Then we just write the formula. Again, super easy, right? Okay, so here's some examples. Carbon monoxide. I see no prefix, which means 1, and mono, which also means 1. So this must be C for carbon, O for oxygen. I don't put the ones down, remember? Then I've got carbon dioxide. There's no prefix there, and there's a di, which would be 2. So this would be CO2. So carbon monoxide is poisonous. Carbon dioxide is something you breathe out. So there's some different things going on there that causes that to happen. For grins and giggles, you should draw the structure to see how they're different also. And then we've got phosphorus trihydride. Again, I have no prefix here, so there's one of those, and then tri means 3, so this must be P for phosphorus. Hydride, remember that "ide" used to be something else, and hydr is the beginning of hydrogen, so this is H3. PH3 would be phosphorus trihydride. Again, writing covalent compounds, formulas and names are the easy ones, so that's it. Go practice in your homework packet and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching.